I wanted to explore that because we were being told, if something terrible like this happens, everybody's going to be talking about it. You are not going to be able to shut people up about this topic. How'd that work out?
Welcome to the Skiffy and Fanny Show. I am Sean, and today I am joined by the fabulous fantasy and science fiction writer, Fran Wilde. Welcome to the show, Fran.
Hello, and thank you for having.
Well, Fran, if you don't know, has so far published 9 novels, a poetry collection, over 70 short stories for adults, teens, and kids. Her stories have been finalists for many awards, including 2 Nebula winners, her debut novel, Updraft, and her debut middle grade story, Riverland. Those were the 2 winners. Her short stories have appeared throughout the major publications and multiple years' best anthologies. But today we are actually talking about a book called The Philosophy of Thieves that, they wrote Philosophy of Kings. That's not correct. Whoever wrote Philosophy of Kings is wrong. It's Philosophy of Thieves. It even said little thieves right here. I think that was a joke because there's a character named King.
No kings except for the character named King, but we are big on no kings in this house.
Yeah. This story in particular, I think kings are not very important. Anyway, it is the first novel of a new series called the Canarvier Files, a high-tech adventure heist wrapped in a gas lamp fantasy. Whew! It's exciting and totally not what I was expecting. I had no idea what was coming, Fran. The book arrived and I was like, what the heck is this? And then I read it and I was like, oh, Fran, you were doing some stuff. What's up?
Yeah.
Excited.
Rich living in a fantasy world, the rest of us living in a sci-fi universe. What do?
Well, let's start with the big first question. What the heck is this book? Like what is it?
It is a heist novel. Many heists, actually. There are multiple heists going on, some of which are on the surface heists, and others are much more subtle. And it is a future fantasy, I would say. There's some body horror. There's a little bit of sci-fi elements. There are definitely some nods to my favorite cyberpunk authors like Gibson and Stevenson and Pat Cadigan. And then there is a whole bunch of murder and stuff. And so it's all of the genres just crammed into one small package. And as I have been telling people, if you are trying to fill out your Reddit fantasy bingo card, this is your book.
There's a lot. There is, in fact, quite a bit going on here because there's a lot of technology and there's sort of, I like how it's described as sort of a gas lamp, right? Which is the technology is still fairly forward, but there's like hints to sort of an alternate version of our world, essentially. I'm very curious because when I started reading this, I was like, Fran must be a fan of leverage.
I do love leverage, yes.
Okay, because I immediately started making comparisons. Yeah.
Nope, yeah. Hardison all the way.
I love Hardison. Hardison's great. To me, it's a different story, right? But there's a lot of power dynamics that are built into how this world is structured, and very overtly so, because I think like the opening sequence is, literally is taking place in like a rich person's house, and then the later heist that's around the middle of the book is also in a very wealthy family's house. And there's lots of discussion about wealthy families and their influence on the city and on the culture. And so it seemed to me that you were definitely making a deliberate poke here at the kind of way a society is stratified by wealth.
I mean, I think that in particular, this city and this walled city has evolved into a very stratified situation, but there's also like layers in each of the cultural groups as well. There are people who really want to be at the top of the wealthy pile, and they're faking it as massively as they can to get there, or they're spending beyond their means and they're going broke. And then there are, the truly wealthy who have kind of surfed through the apocalypse, and really didn't get affected by it, except that they got wealthier, which, why, who, that's such a fantastical idea. It would never happen in real life. But then there is a number of different groups that are trying to survive at different levels. And I really wanted to look at what happens when a lot of wealth is just collected all in one very small area, and held by very few people. But I also wanted to look at family dynamics across the
Mm.
board, and especially in groups that are, I think the thieves themselves, who are present themselves as being from the city, but they're actually from the skirts, which is outside the city, and they sneak into the city to be part of it and to take part of it in it, all that the city has to offer. They view themselves as educators. They view themselves as performers who are educating the populace on all of the different thieves of history. And by doing that, they're actually talking about a parts of history that were really lost over time. The thieves are also, they view themselves as performers. They don't view themselves
Yeah.
as criminals necessarily, although thing goes on throughout the book in various ways, and there are lots of people who are taking advantage of these performances to actually crime a lot. So there, I mean, the thing about leverage is about is a very Robin Hood sort of situation where, they are righting wrongs and fixing the imbalances a lot. And I don't know that the Carnarvon set out to do that when King founded the troop. I think King's idea was, this is fun. I'm a, theater kid kind of guy in the post-apocalyptic world. What am I going to do? And at the same time, there were all of these rich families that had decided that they were kind of bored with the entertainment they had going for their parties, and decided to,
Yeah.
after a very historically well-known actual robbery, where someone showed off how wealthy they were, they decided that this is great. Let's just keep doing this, and we'll hire thieves to perform robberies, and we'll try and catch them, which is a great way to set up yourself for winning as a host, no matter what happens. If the thieves get away with the stuff, you buy it back, and then you look great. If the thieves don't get away with the stuff, if your guests catch the thieves, you also look great. The only thing that could possibly be a flaw in that plan is if you also happen to be managing a large security firm, and trying to sell your services to the rest of your peers and friends, which, oops.
Create some
Yep.
problems.
In a nutshell.
I love that you dealt with so it's something, part of why I was thinking of leverage a lot is the way you mentioned earlier, right? This idea that thievery can become, in this society, is in some cases now a performance, right? It is a thing, like you essentially hire people, they go out on a contract and they perform a heist, right, as part of a grand spectacle. And I think that in a lot of ways, when we look at heists in our media, right, we look at them, these very grand, fun, adventure kinds of things, right? But they're things that typically we don't look as kindly on in the real world, with some exceptions, when they're
I
just
mean,
kind of fun.
I do want to shout out to the Louvre just for a minute for dropping
Yeah.
that heist right in the middle of my book tour. That was great. Thank you very much for setting your security cameras passwords to the word Louvre, because I mean, it was just a cascade of mistakes and errors all the way through. And from what we have seen so far, and we could be very wrong because the jewels are still missing in the Louvre heist,
They are.
the guys that did this feel to me like they were just kind of out on their scooters, and they saw a lift near, parked near the Louvre, and were like, "Hey, that's cool. What do you think? Let's go." And the brute force attack method is an excellent method of getting what you want if you can get in and out safely, but it's not necessarily the smoothest of heists, and we have seen that, they dropped some pretty expensive stuff in the sewer on their way out. But I think
Jeez.
there's still a level of entertainment There's still a lot of people watching this real time heist and thinking, wow, that is a lot different than everything I've read. And then the inspector shows up and like straight out of Menswear Daily. I mean, he's amazing. And it's one of those moments where you get to talk about what a heist is, and you get to talk about what a robbery is, and you get to talk about what a gambit is, and all of the
Yeah.
different aspects of like heists are a very particular form of sort of a structure of entertainment. We have structured them so that audience can participate as they either
Yeah.
read the book or watch the movie. And an actual real time caper or robbery is not usually audience participation friendly. That's much more dangerous.
And yet in this book, I was thinking of the heist that's in the middle of the book in particular, right?
Yeah.
Where, we get so much of the setup of it. We see how it's all being kind of put together, and we also get to see like how much the sort of artifice of the invention of this as a thing that everyone's participating in kind of comes together. And it's really exciting and fun until things go wrong. You know,
I mean, some would consider that fun also, possibly not my characters, but
well, yes, as a reader, not one experiencing like, bad things happening, yeah.
I mean,
But yeah,
Dax does bring a lot of things on himself.
this is a trend I was noticing is Rue keeps telling him, stop doing that, and he keeps
Don't
doing the thing he shouldn't do. Yep.
don't push the button. Dax then immediately pushes the button. Yep,
Yep.
that's my chaos goblin. That's Dax.
He's a fun character though because he has so much swagger.
Hmm.
He's very charming. He's not always the brightest in terms of doing the thing like common sense wise, but he's an enormously charming character.
Right.
It's fun to listen to him and to like see like, okay, I know you're gonna get in trouble doing it this way, but I kind of don't want you to.
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, he was a fun character to write because he is such a great foil to Rusa, who is the straight arrow. She's going to play it by the book if she can because she's got goals. She's got, other things she wants to do. And Dax just wants to go for the dazzle. He wants to be he wants to be as well known as the Carnarviers are. And they are known as one of the the best troops of thieves in the city. Dax wants to double that. By the end of this first heist, he wants to be, the number one in the world if he can make it so, even though that would be hugely difficult in this era. And his ambition is kind of like stars in his eyes. He has no idea how he's going to get there, but he's sure he deserves it. And I
He
love
does.
that. I love just that sort of like confidence with no basis. In fact, none.
But he's such a well written character. I thought not just because he's a foil, although I agree he's a very effective foil to Rue. I think part of it is like I can see people reading themselves into his character. Reading some of that. Like I saw my 12-year-old son in Dax. Like my 12-year-old son has a wall of. He's 12, so all of his confidence is largely unearned, right? Because he's 12, he hasn't quite got there yet, right? And so I saw so much of my kid in Dax. I was like, if my kid was in this universe doing these heist performances, my kid would be Dax, right? He'd
Yeah,
be this like bravado, and he'd saunter into a room and like talk up some ladies, like he would do all of these kinds of things, and then pick
yeah,
your watch.
yeah. That's Dax, and that's I think like I wanted my heist troupe to be slightly different than some of my favorite heist troops, which are usually assembly troops. They're the in Neuromancer, the heist gang is assembled by a crazy ex-military guy, and it's the hacker and the breaker and the muscle and just all put together, held together with threats and with leverage. This is a team of friends. This is a found family who all really like each other, but there are points in time where they walk away, or Sophie does a play and they run away. And there is this element that I wanted to add because family complicates everything. And you and I have talked about this before, that family makes everything harder and more interesting because you have so much more to lose. And found family, the same thing is true, but the secrets that are available to you in terms of a flesh and blood family that has been together for life,
Mm.
and the layers of nuance, and also, you can critique somebody with a look, if you've known them for long enough in a family. Not that that's necessarily a good idea, but I wanted to play with that because I think that the family dynamics in this troop is, and pretty much in terms of everybody in the book, it makes them more interesting because they Dax and Rusa truly care about each other, and they care about King, and they care about Nan. They just have different ways of showing it.
There's a lot, yeah. So I think thinking about like your writing of all of the various characters, I don't want to say that there's not archetypes at work here, because I don't think that's entirely true, but they're not, as you say, like that kind of like designed troop archetypes, right? There's a lot more complex dynamics that are present here. And I guess I kind of want to talk about, or ask you about, you're sort of designing all these characters in this world. How do you go about sort of building the foundations of who they are and weaving them into essentially like a completely invented world here?
I started this book as a short story. I wrote
Oh,
the pickpocketing in the ballroom scene as a short story in 2010 or 2011, for a workshop that Gregory Frost was running in Philadelphia. I had just moved to Philadelphia. I was looking for a writing group, and I stumbled upon this wonderful group that eventually included AC Wise and AT Greenblatt and Siobhan Carroll. And it was just so many. Bernie Moses was in it. I'm trying to think of all the people that were in it now. If you were in this group called The Bridge in Philadelphia, hello. This is the short story that I wrote for that before I left for Viable Paradise, and immediately, started writing Updraft and put this aside. But I had been trying to write kind of a beyond steampunk. I wanted to step outside of the steampunk era. Although the ball gown is definitely, kind of high tech speed steampunk. I almost said speed punk, and that's a very,
yeah.
but I wanted to see how much a highly competent character who was pickpocketing this very wealthy event could get away with. And that was really the goal of that. And then I started thinking about who she was and why she was
Mm.
there, and who she was arguing with, because she was definitely already fighting with Dax, because her partner was not helping the way that she thought he should be, and who were the people that they were robbing. And as I thought about that more, all of the questions about the world and what kind of world is this that would support this kind of thing as entertainment just kind of unfolded from that first ballroom scene. And it took a while. It definitely took many drafts. I put this down so many times for various reasons, and picked it up almost as many times because I'd get an email from Greg Frost saying, "Where's my story?" Or, "Hey, aren't you finished that yet?" And I'm, "No, I'm writing, I'm writing the Gem World. I'm doing all this other stuff. Go away, Greg."
Yeah.
But that's why if you open the book to the first page, that's why it's dedicated to Greg, is because he believed in it. And sometimes
Ah.
writers just need somebody to be like, "You remember that story? I want you to finish that story." And so I did. That's how the whole thing came about. It was first the pickpocketing scene and the arguments. And it really, most times, if my characters feel strongly enough about something in a first draft to argue about it, and not just sort of walk around a fancy world, picking up flowers and
Yeah.
going, "What does this do?" Then I know I have a plot. I know I have a story, and I have
Ah.
some viable characters with interests and passions and things to lose, and that makes them fun to write.
I find that really interesting because you would so I know that there are some writers who might take like the tactic of, they'll like maybe start writing and go, oh, I kind of have like a little idea here, and now I'm gonna like diagram my characters, right? I'm gonna get like, who are all of these people? But for you, there's this like congealing moment when the characters begin to behave in a certain way that like it almost like an iceberg effect, right? They're at the top of the iceberg, and now there's a mountain underneath there I can like dig up
Yeah.
now. And it's this argument is the example you're using here. I find that very interesting. I'm gonna have to abuse this idea. I might have to try this myself one day.
I love it. It has worked for me a couple of different times, but this one in particular because I really had to convince myself and others that a multiple genre book, which was not what genre fiction was in the 2010s. People were pretty much sticking to their wheelhouses, and me mashing all these genres up together was alarming to some people. So I had to really convince myself that at least this was going to be fun to write, and using that structure is where I'm comfortable. If honestly, if I can hear my characters fighting about something, I know there's something there. Especially because then I know that there's more than one character. Which, if you start with a world and a great idea, sometimes you just have a character walking through, going, "Yeah, this is a great world. This is a really cool idea," and nothing ever happens. But if you've got two characters who are like, really struggling over something. And you can see that even in Updraft. The first
Yeah.
two scenes that I wrote in Updraft, one was a winged knife fight in a wind tower, which ended up being in the middle of the book, and the other was Kirat arguing with her mother over whether she would be allowed to go help on her mother's mission. And those two things, I don't always start with a fight, but I do start with some tension and some, people are
Yeah.
upset with each other because the stakes are really high.
Yeah, that conflict that exists between characters kind of gives you a sense of what has led us to this moment. Why are they arguing, and
Mhm.
what is that tied into the world?
Yeah. And if you think about it, like the idea of leverage begins when somebody comes to the troupe and says, "I have a problem," which is a classic noir beginning. Even though it's been
Yes.
altered, but this is the person walks into the office, and there's an individual sitting there with a
The Maltese
fedora on,
Falcon.
and there's a
Yeah.
bottle in the drawer. Yeah, it's so Maltese Falcon, but that's literally how they kick off a lot of these, and that patterns for that, wondering, well, who is this, and are they lying, or is this the real truth, and what is really happening here? And you're off to the races because your imagination is rolling for I, there are so many good heist stories out there. The lead in for Ocean's 11 is almost always people dreaming of what they're going to have when they succeed at the robbery.
Yeah.
Ocean's 8 is great at that. They just sort of hint at everybody's wish list from the beginning, and then you get to see them get it all at the end, which is really fun.
I love how you brought up the noir elements, because you're completely right. That is a noir setup that Leverage loves to play with. They just infrequently use the like aesthetic style of noir, but like the narrative components are there. And I think there's a little bit in this book too. There's definitely pieces. And when you'd mentioned earlier the sort of cross genre stuff, and I knew we were gonna have to talk about this because there are so many different elements. You'd mentioned much earlier the cyberpunk influences that are here from some of your favorite writers. And I noticed that immediately because of the amount of different kinds of surveillance that are at work. You have these chapters in here that are actually like recordings of interviews and other kinds of like video footage that's being described to us, which made me immediately think like this is a very modern sort of cyberpunk surveillance type of situation. And then of course you've got all of these other elements. We kind of talked about the heist, which is a completely different genre, and you have a little bit of noir in there as well. You've got the sort of like social tale is kind of built into this as well. I don't want to say it's Great Gatsby like, because I don't think the politics are quite the same, but like there's that element of Great Gatsby ish in there. Uh,
I wasn't unhappy to see Kirkus calling it a cyberpunk Great Gatsby. It made me quite
oh my
happy.
gosh.
Um, so, but yeah, I mean, I some of my favorite shows and some of my favorite books really do hint to you that there's more going on than just a story. I don't know if you remember a show called Pushing Daisies, which had Lee Pace
Yes.
and Swoozie Kurtz, and oh gosh, it was so good. And it was paranormal, right? That was a paranormal with, the main character had a pie shop, and there, I think he had a pie shop, and or was, working, somebody was working in a mortuary, and so they were solving mysteries. But there's, in the first episode, there's Kai McBride, the cop, knitting a gun cozy. He's literally just knitting a sweater for his gun. And it's like, literally, this is going to be a cozy paranormal mystery with added, romance in it and pie. How can you go wrong with that? Like, that is just amazing to me. Also, just the fact that that show happened is amazing, but it was just like that level of hinting at the meta text of so many different genres gives you handholds to say, okay, all right, I'm in this part of the genre now, and over here I'm in this part, and I like that. It's something that I really enjoy, especially in the media that I consume. So thought people might like it too if I tried it.
Do you find in writing a book that kind of is very cross genre, did you find that process of putting this together into like a novel form, was that a difficult process to kind of navigate all of those different conventions?
It turns out that crime readers really want to know what happened. If you say, there was a thing that happened, if there was a mess, there was, the in this book, the wealthy call the sort of societal break the turbulence, because they got rattled around a little bit, but nothing really happened. And everybody else calls it the mess. And things were lost to time. There was this huge cultural upheaval, and there's still a lot of mourning going on,
Yeah.
generational mourning. And I wanted to explore that because we were being told, if something terrible like this happens, everybody's going to be talking about it. You are not going to be able to shut people up about this topic. How'd that work out? It's odd because I started writing this in 2010, 2011, and looking back on it now, the pushback that I got, I'm just like, okay, I'm really glad that I waited so that I could write this post pandemic, because I did write the last two drafts after the pandemic, and also kind of during the pandemic. And it's not a pandemic book, but it does, look around and say, people don't want to talk about the bad stuff. Nobody wanted to talk about the flu in 1913 or 1916, or, again in 1917. They kept not talking about it, and then they kept getting the flu. It's just amazing how badly that works. But there is this element of crime reading where if you say a thing happened, they want to know legitimately, for crime related, solving
Mm,
related reasons, how it happened, who did it, when it happened, all the specifics. And I did the speculative fiction thing where it's there. The answers
yeah.
are there, but they're layered into the details and into the strata of society. And I'm not specifically saying these are the things that happened. Here's the timelines. I want people to figure out, as much as they want to figure out. Gibson did that by talking about the jackpot in the peripheral, which is one of the world's most perfect books. And also, Amazon should not have canceled that series. There are so many authors in speculative fiction that just say, a bad thing happened. Here we are now. Let's continue the story. But I got some notes from the crime readers that are like, how could you not say what happened, and why, and I get it. I do get it, because it is integral to some of the details of the story. Writing cross genre does have those pitfalls because you are agreeing with your readers. I'm going to tell you a story in this vein. and there are going to be these things here. And if you set up a heist with all of the different characteristics of a heist, you've got the plan, you've got the maps, everybody knows their spot, everybody knows their role, and then things go wrong, people are going to expect the other aspects of the heist too, unless you put a very
Yeah.
visible Ty McBride over in a corner knitting a gun cozy and say, this is also going to be this kind of movie.
I find that fascinating because then there is, well, so I agree completely, right? Different readers who are very interested in a specific kind of work have very specific expectations about how those kinds of works operate, right? The kinds of things they include. But then that suggests that there's always, or potentially always, a tension between crossing genres. Maybe some work a little bit more seamless together because the readers of those different genres, their reading expectations are kind of similar. But when you cross into others, those readers of that other genre may be less so. And so you identify specifically here the sort of science fiction often will speculate, imagine something, and then leave us a lot of clues about what that is. And so there's a sort of expectation of the reader to like pay attention to the clues, kind of piece things together, start figuring out what it is. Whereas the crime reader kind of expects almost like just the facts, ma'am, to some degree, kind of being laid down.
I mean, they do
Not
enjoy having
universally, but
clues to put together as well, and I think that, I absolutely agree. I think that blending genres gives you tension. When you make what I did, which is a genre turducken, there's just like one genre after another after another. You've got a lot of tension, but I was really careful, or I tried to be really careful, not to cross certain genres, because when you cross, say, romance with certain forms of coercive politics, which, I there is a character in here who is not a very nice person, who is a point of view character, and I did that on purpose because I really needed to get a read on why he thought these things were okay, and
yeah,
what the heck was happening. But I didn't like him, and then he fell in love, and I was like, oh God, what do I do with you now? Because this is you're a bad person. And it turns out that the person he fell in love with kind of had his number too. So it was interesting, but it was also very, I had to thread that needle very carefully, because I did not want this to be that kind of narrative. That was not
yeah,
that was not where I wanted to go. And when you cross genres, and like every story has multiple genres, and it's just usually one of them is very forward and the others are kind of back notes. But if you
yeah.
have a multi-genre or a genre blending story, they all come forward at different times. Like they're different characters in the story almost.
Yeah, and this book in particular is a good example of that because there are these sort of. By the way, Paul just showed up in chat, and so we see you, Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Yeah. This is gonna be in the podcast and everything. We see you.
We miss
Anyway,
you.
sorry. Sorry, I had to tease Paul. Uh, in this book, right, you have it's being described kind of like as a gas lamp, a sort of science fiction fantasy element, and I would say that's like your overarching. But because the heist narrative is so important, all of the conventions of that type of storyline are also deeply woven in, and I actually really like the way that you made them work together, because while I'm noticing them because I'm being critical and I'm like thinking about all of the elements as I was reading it, once I got about a chapter in, I just was like I was just in the flow of it. I kind of wasn't paying attention to, oh, there's this genre and this genre. I was just kind of, this is all like blended together and it's all part of this cohesive world. I have no idea how you do that because some of these genres are not like they're very distinct narrative genres from science fiction, genre fiction, fantasy, etc. It's astonishing, and so A+.
Thank you. You mentioned the feed earlier, and I did want to talk about that a little bit, because that A gets its own type treatment from Erewhon, which they did an
Yeah,
amazing job doing the heist level things in a very Art Deco style, and then the feed, which is the line of sight city only media feed specifically to New Washington. It's also pay to play, so anything that gets popular gets more expensive to read. And I envisioned it because I was trying to think of what what it would look like to create, to stitch together a culture in a way that incorporated, different aspects of society without it being top down. And I kind of built it thinking it was going to be kind of like Next Door meets YouTube meets like old school fandom on like the Wanderlust boards and all of the different like things before TV tropes ruined everything. And there are so many different ways in which that became kind of the way that rumor works in Middlemarch. It just kind of threads through the story. And there is an aspect of the genre of the feed is fandom. It's just this like everybody's got a favorite, and everybody's got, oh, I found the secret
Yeah.
footage of this and all these different things. And then there are people like actively deleting records at the same time. And then as well, there are, civic duty aspects to the feed, and you get to see kind of the voice of the city throughout, and
Mm.
that was really hard to write, and it was really fun to write because it was just like there are more people here watching this and being entertained by it than just the wealthy people and the thieves. It was everybody had, a kind of, there were betting pools, and there were, of course there would be betting pools.
Of
There was
course.
just a lot of stuff. Yeah.
I love the betting pools is really fun because it reminds me it now like every sport I have any vague interest in is now a long string of gambling ads basically. Like in sports, by the way, that have a long history of the people adjudicating those, like judges and referees, etc., of being corrupt and and
Mhm.
fixing matches and so on. And so I just find there's something deeply like maybe it's me, but it feels like deeply just dishonest and cynical of like just how much like gamble, gamble, gamble. And I'm like, but I can't trust that you aren't going to rig this in a way that
Right.
hurts my bottom line. So no, I'm not doing it.
I mean, somewhere along the way, we took sport, which, as you said, has always been infused with lots of different things, both the expectation of people to break themselves in order to win, but also this level of, somebody's got their finger on the till somewhere out there. And like we've kind of been like, okay, where's the bottom? Where's the thing that we could possibly throw lower than? And then we just went for it as a society, and we're like, no, we can get worse than that. That can be
Yeah,
terrible too. And I hate it. I hate it. I feel like especially kids sports should be left alone. Kids should be kids should get to play.
I
And
agree.
they're not. It's
It,
a
it's
business. It's a business from the jump.
it's a very alarming. And while I know that's not necessarily specifically tied directly into your
This is
book,
not thieves
I'm gonna
related at all. This is just me and my personal soapbox coming out and being like, no.
but it does at least dovetail off of or can bounce off of the way in which your book right, really tries to unpack how the different levels of power at which we kind of began this interview with, right? The ways that they sort of influence and manipulate everything basically underneath them in sometimes very subtle ways and sometimes, just really brutal ways, putting people who frankly don't have a lot to them in really horrible situations.
Yes.
And in large cases, they don't care, the people that are doing this. And in some cases, they're just oblivious to it, right? They just have no concept that it's happening. And I was thinking immediately of like kind of in the middle of the book when Dax is like trying to plant himself inside the party, right? And he goes through like past all of the like kitchens and the servant quarters and all of these things. And there's some very subtle ways that you sort of unpack like he says a comment to one of the sous chefs about how this person he's supposedly working for thinks really highly of them, right? Knowing that there's a power dynamic that's there
Yeah.
because they're at different levels, right? And then even further up, right? As soon as he moves up the stairs, right, he's immediately with wealthy people. That hierarchy is so ingrained into the society that you've built that I think that the levels of detail that you manage to get in there is really quite amazing. And I don't know how you think of all that, but I'll just let you talk about it because it's very interesting.
I mean, I think that the everything's a game. to Dax. So he's playing different roles at different levels, and the details that are apparent to him. I mean, he will also, take anything off a tray and eat it, which is, just it doesn't go well for him anytime he does this, and he
Nope.
still tries it. But that's part of it too, is that Dax doesn't quite fit in, and the tastes of things are so abhorrent to him because he's grown up tasting different things, that it's a marker of how well he can transform himself, that he manages to keep, a whole, egg that has been soaked in something that very wealthy people would consider umami or savory, and just keep it in his
Yeah.
mouth when he's just used to sweet things. And he thought this was going to be a sweet thing. I really wanted to get that sensory explosion of what a party
Yeah.
feels like, but not just for the people attending the party, but also for the people working the party, because that is just such a crazy rush. I did, some catering of parties, and when I was in high school, that was part of how, babysitting and catering and other things. And it was just always this amazing whirl at the, you know, downstairs or the back of the kitchens. With everybody had sharp knives too, so it was all very complicated. And I
Hmm.
wanted to capture that because that's part of what makes the party another level of performance. So getting all the layers, getting all the nuance, getting the fact that, the host was so over the top that he had his shoes programmed to do the first dance for him, just all those different pieces needed to come together just like a party does. There's always somebody managing the details. So I wrote those scenes a lot. I mapped the house, much like the Canarviers do. I tried to figure out, how they would do different things and when would be the most prestigious. What the most prestigious part of the grand heist would be, and I kind of decided that it wasn't going to be the ball because that was the first night, and things kind of roll on from there. But at the same time, you can't have just the detail work. You got to have the characters' emotions, and the host of the party is getting more and more frustrated and more angry, and he's starting to break things, and he's starting to do stuff that he shouldn't be doing because he's got goals and ambitions. The party is the emphasis of all of that, and so yeah, that was pretty fun.
I could tell you had a lot of fun writing this book.
It was
Hearing you
it.
talk about it, and yeah.
I hope people have as good a time reading it, as I had writing it.
It's a fun book. I'm telling Brandon O'Brien he has to read it.
Well, he should, and then we should make a game out of it.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
We should do like a TTRPG in this world. Oh, Brandon would have so
Oh, that
much
would be
fun with
so
that.
fun. I'm down. I have to ask my publisher. But did you see me switch? I was whoops. But I would love to see that. That would be a blast.
It'd be very cool. Yeah, but
I'm sure
obviously
they would be
conversation
I'm
with
sure they would
publisher.
be into it if like everybody who played would also leave like a Goodreads review. They really seem to like that as much as anything
I can
else.
do that. I can do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
This book just seems like the kind of book that is really up the alley for people that need a good time. There's still political elements to this, and there's, definitely like social message in the sense of it's, tackling the power dynamics of this world and wealth and so on. But it is also like an incredibly fun read. Watching the heists come to fruition is way, way too much fun. It was a fun right from the beginning, and it was fun when it kept going, and it was fun when we got to the end.
Oh, thank you, Sean. That means a lot.
You're welcome. I
Paul,
enjoyed the
Paul,
book.
do you have any questions in the chat?
Paul did say it was fun to read. Now, Paul wasn't being eloquent, but that's because typing takes time.
Mhm.
But Paul did say that.
Okay.
So if it may take Paul a second to respond, but if Paul has any specific questions that Paul would like answered, Paul may ask them at this moment,
He's gonna love
which
us
I think is
so
really
much.
great.
Yes.
The amount of references, poor Paul.
And not just
Um,
Paul. If you're watching, I'd love to take some questions.
we do have a few more minutes before we got to start to wind down, and so if folks do have questions, they're feel free to pop one in. What I would like to do is ask an easy question because you had another book come out as well this year. Do you want to tell us just a little bit about that book while people think about questions? Yeah.
Sure. I had 6 weeks before my novel came out with Erewhon. I had a collection of short stories come out from Fairwood Press at Worldcon, and that was exhilarating. We sold out of the books that Patrick brought with him, which was amazing. This is my first collection of short stories. I loved doing it with Fairwood because many of these were written at Rainforest Writers Retreat, which is closely associated because Patrick runs both of those. And he did just a gorgeous job. This is a beautiful book. The cover's stunning.
Yeah.
And I got to have a collection of short stories that I can carry around like this and occasionally open up to the table of contents and be like, oh, wow, yeah, I did write that. That's cool. Because I have the memory of a goldfish when it comes to things that I've done. But it's really fun. I got to read a short story that I have never read in public at KGB Fantastic Fiction in September,
Ah.
which was also fun. I read a story called Building Migration Number One, which is about when super smart skyscrapers get restless building syndrome and want to go see the fjords and other things. But just a combination of, I made the choice of not making it all one genre. Surprise. There are fantasy stories in here. There are shape-shifting stories. There are horror stories. There are stories that are a combination of all of those things. There is a novella called The Midway, which I would um, put in the category of fantastical horror. Please
Hmm.
don't call it horror. And there are some stories that I don't even know how to categorize. My Deadlands story is in here called My Cloak of Keys, and that is about a lesser god of the dead who rescues the pets of people who have passed away. And
Oh.
I don't know how to categorize that.
Let me ask you a question. You have more short stories than are in that collection. So,
It
how
is
did you
true.
kind of decide?
I love making a table of contents that feels like a poem that is sort of talking to you when you
Ah.
when you read it down the page. I knew that I wanted to keep the Gem World short stories set aside for future goals that I have for the Gem World. I want to do a collection of all the short stories together and some of the bigger stories. I knew that there were a few short stories that I am working on in different ways still, so those came out as well. But also, I wanted to keep to a reasonable length so that it wasn't a huge tome, so that I could do this again sometime. It's really fun to have all my short stories together in a book that I can draw. And I spent most of Worldcon drawing storms that people requested into their collections. So there's a whole set of short story books out there by me with different bespoke storms in them.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
You had
for
fun.
collectors. That is a collector alert. And I have to say, AC Wise, who has been reading my short stories, some of them over and over and over again as part of my critique friends, was amazing. Her read of this collection is in the front of the collection, and just that made me feel really good that reading what she wrote was amazing. Sometimes you don't get that, but it's kind of, I think it's really helpful for writers to know what they're doing right.
Hmm. It is.
And sometimes we have a hard time seeing that ourselves. So it's nice to see what other people think.
This is what I tell my students when we do peer reviews for composition courses, not creative writing, but just telling someone it's good isn't actually useful, but telling them what specifically they do that's good, then they can take
Yes,
that and say, "Oh, I'm good at this thing. I just need to keep that up, and then I can now work on the things I'm not as good at."
exactly. It also means don't throw that out, which is very useful too.
Yes, very true, very true. So Paul had a question which you semi-answered, but maybe you can talk just a little bit more specifically about it, which would be he wrote this. I would like her take on what her take. Okay, I would like her take on the post-mess United, how the post-mess United States reflects works like Gibson or Stevenson or other writers writing in this space. If that I've tried to make that make sense to me.
Absolutely. I think I mentioned before just the way that Gibson uses the jackpot in the peripheral talks. It's not just one bad thing that's happened, but sort of a slow boil of lots of different things that sort of shift the culture. When Malka Older and Jacqueline Koniagi and Curtis Chen and I were writing Ninth Step Station for Realm, which is a radio play that we wrote a couple of years ago. That's set in a future Japan, future Tokyo that is after an event, and that too was not just one thing, but lots of things that really changed people's ability to cope, and everybody just went right on with about their business as best they could to try and make the world seem and look the same. I think there is that tendency, especially in cyberpunk, especially in speculative fiction that's sort of near future, of people to try and cling to what's familiar and tradition, even when the world isn't supporting that anymore. So
Hmm.
there's a nod to that. One of my, I love Neil Stevenson. I just enjoy how layered and nuanced his world building is. And one of my favorites is the Diamond Age, just because there are so many different constructs, and there is that layer of fantasy in there, as well as a layer of social commentary, and there are these great characters. And I think a lot about how he constructed that world and how he made a character out of that world in ways that I can't even begin to reach. So there is
Well,
that. The cyberpunk is kind of in my DNA. I grew up reading it. I will never not read it, and I love the ways that we have made the hacker sort of the true, like, groups of thieves with a hacker are the ones that can play with the lights and fold space so that they can break into the minds of different people. I like the opportunities that arise when you've got cyberpunk in the DNA of your book.
hmm. I like that. That's fun.
I mean, speaking of genre blending, if you haven't read Arkady Martine's Rose House, that is like Hill House cyberpunk version, but so much more
Oh,
because it's Arkady. It's just brilliant.
my library has it, and I need it
You
now.
should. Yes,
I will grab it. The way you just
cyber
described that
gothic.
sounds.
It's
Oh
cyber
yeah,
goth.
I'm in. That's two of my favorite things right now because I got into horror during the pandemic because I'm weird. And if you can, I love cyberpunk too. That's one of my favorite subgenres. So you put those two things together. Let's go. Pause another one for you, which
Okay.
is a thing we haven't really technically talked about, although it was mentioned at the very beginning, which is gas lamp fantasy, which this is being
Mhm.
described as. He mentions it in the context of crossing genre, subgenre kind of stuff. And I guess the bigger question would be, what was it about that particular variation that kind of interested you in this book?
The glamour and the kind of dirt underneath the glamour of Gaslamp. That idea of, everything is kind of shady and dangerous and sharp, but there's also some really beautiful aspects to it. It's like neo-Victorianism without any of the morality, I guess.
Ah,
Which,
yeah.
but I took it sideways, and I definitely gave my own interpretation of it. There are probably people out there listening going, that's neither Gaslamp nor neo-Victorian. And I'm like, no, this is Fran's version, because that's me thinking about sort of what if you took Dickensian politics and Dickensian strategies for society and just airdropped it into the future where some people have just unreal amounts of money and can do anything they want, including live in a fantasy world, while other people are just barely getting by. And I mean, I invoke Dickens because this is a very Dickensian era that we're living in now. It's
Yep.
not just Gatsby. We have gone all the way back to Bleak House and Oliver Twist in some senses, and I think that calling that what it is, which isn't just Victorian, but also, highly dangerous, bludgeon to the back of the head sort of stuff is really it's important to acknowledge.
I agree. All right, pause. One last one that we're gonna ask because you've actually already talked about the found family thing because
Yeah.
that was much earlier in the interview, but he did ask this, which is I'm just gonna read exactly what he wrote. If this book began with two, what was the final piece or character that came together?
Well, that is a great
I
question,
think he
Paul.
means
And I
Rue,
think,
but
oh, if the book began with Rue, it did, because Rue was in the ballroom picking pockets, but Dax was also there already.
yes.
It's what's interesting is it's not the additional character that made it, although adding Mason Graves as a POV character definitely shifted the book in a lot of directions. The original heist had a third major player who was King. King was actually at the original robbery, and that overcomplicated a lot of things because King literally exists to overcomplicate and embellish things. And taking him out of action and making his kids have to go save him absolutely changed the story and turned it quite 360. Then adding Mason in really did too. The Russo's dress has always been in the book, and I kind of count Russo's dress as an unnamed, fourth major character. But that it taking out and putting Mason in as POV character was pretty much the big shift.
I like it. Awesome. Okay, we have to
Thank you
wind
for the
down, which
questions,
means we
Paul.
they're great questions.
Yes.
I'll ask the sort of our wind up questions, which is the first one is the obvious one, which is what are you working on next? Which you kind of told me about a little bit off podcast, so I don't know how much you can say about it now, but I know you're at least working on one thing.
It's been announced. I am working on the third book in a trilogy for Star Wars, with just great anticipation for actually being able to say I have written it, because that is still terrifying to me that I'm doing this. I'm working on a couple of poems for this coming year. I don't have a lot coming out personally, but I am working on things that will come out over the next period of time. The second Canarvier book is also in the works. I can't tell you much except that Dax gets the opportunity of his dreams, which will be very fun. I'm also continuing to serve as the co-editor in chief of the Sunday Morning Transport, which is my heart and my joy to publish new authors and authors writing in a variety of genres every Sunday for that magazine.
Perfect. I'm excited. I will ask you questions later about the Star Wars thing. Uh, um,
I can only tell you what I am authorized to tell you, which is basically what
Oh,
I just
don't
said.
worry. I won't ask for secrets. I'm not asking for
Okay.
military secrets here. No, no, no. I wouldn't put you on the spot like that. Separate
Thank
question.
you.
But anyway, for folks that would like to find you and your work, where would they
Yes.
go?
I have two places to I operate. My website is franwilde.net, FRANWILDE.net. And then I have a Patreon where all of my things go. I publish a monthly free column of stuff I love, and also do free to subscribers write ins twice a month. I do some more level up things where I host a mini journaling workshop every month. I take some mentees and I teach classes on a very irregular basis. The next one is coming up this Sunday. I don't know when the podcast is going to air, so if you're listening to this later, sorry, but I'm teaching a class on how to write a heist on November 9th, and you can get to that
Oh,
through Eventbrite. But the links to both my podcast, not my podcast, the links to both my Patreon and my website are available on my Instagram, on Threads, and on Blue Sky. I am fairly limited in my participation on other social media right now. I'm trying to keep a lid on it. It's very hard. So that's where you find me. And then also at bookstores where great books are sold.
excellent. Well, Fran, thank you very much for coming to talk to me and everybody here about your work. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a joy and a pleasure to talk with you again, Sean. I feel like we really come
It's exciting.
360. Yeah.
Yeah, it's only been 11 years. No big deal.
Why do I get the feeling that that interview is going to be linked to this podcast inextricably? It might happen. It might.
I might just do it. You should listen to our interview about Updraft though, because that book is really good, and also the interviews. I think it's like really good. So
I have no idea what I said in that interview, so that should be very interesting also.
excellent. Well, for folks at home, thank you all for being here. If you'd like to let us know what you thought if you read this book, for example, please send us an email, skiffyandfanty@gmail.com, or if you are in our Patreon Discord, you can obviously go to our show discussion channel, or since it's a book, the book discussion channel, and talk about it. We're happy to hear your thoughts. We're all over the place on the socials. The best way to find all of those links is skiffyandfanty.com/skiffythings, and then you'll just find links to all of those places. We're live, assuming my internet holds, every Friday at 7 p.m. Central on Twitch at twitch.tv/alphabetstreams, which is my channel. And so if you can come see us do whatever the new show is, if you are so inclined. And then please let folks know about this ridiculous show. Review us, I don't know, tell your friends, share things on socials. And if you have money that you don't need, you can go to our Patreon, which is patreon.com/skiffyandfanty. I emphasize the don't need part because I know things are getting rough. And so I do not want people giving us their money they need for things like food or medication. I do not want to hear that you gave that to us. You keep that for your important things that you need to deal with. We we'll survive somehow. So thanks everybody very much. I won't say where you find me because you all know I'm in the internet. It's fine. So I need to make it happy though. That is required in the Skiffy Fanty bylaws. And so I will just announce now. Fran doesn't know I'm announcing this, but we will be gearing up for our own heist. We are stealing Paul's secret stash of root beer that he has been hoarding for generations. And so, Paul, expect us to take your stuff.
You guys were with me the time. Solid
Correct.
alibi.
And on that note, happy ending and scene. If you want to support this show, you can go to patreon.com/skiffyandfanty or skiffyandfanty.com, our website, where you can get access to all of our fancy things. Our music comes from Holy Mole. You can support him and his work at patreon.com/holymole. Thank you for listening.